Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited to be with you today because, well, we're jumping into something massive. We're talking about the shifting, incredibly high-stakes landscape of startup funding. But we aren't just skimming the surface-level money talk here. No. We're going to do a real deep dive into the underlying mathematical architecture of modern venture capital and exactly how it intersects with true, undeniable creator protection. If you care at all about innovation, who owns it, and how it's fundamentally built, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention. They don't really care if the horse is killed as long as there is one winning. Wow. It's a brutal quote, straight from the source material. But honestly, it perfectly captures the harsh, disposable reality of the traditional hyper-growth startup funding model. Think about it. Billions of dollars are often just torched in a matter of months, all to artificially inflate user metrics. It's a system that treats founders like disposable lottery tickets, and it completely disregards the immense collateral damage, the burned-out founders, the totally wasted technological innovation that gets left behind when those companies inevitably crash and burn. So, here's our roadmap for today. First up, the casino versus the vineyard. Second, the provenance VC subset. Third, crossing the semiotic bridge. Fourth, the Agentic Publishing House. And finally, securing creator sovereignty. Let's just dive right into it. All right, Section 1, the casino versus the vineyard, the startup funding clash. We're looking at a fundamental clash of philosophies here in how new companies are built and funded from the ground up. The contrast is literally day and night. On one side, we have what the sources define as the liquidator VC. This operates exactly like a Las Vegas casino floor. It's totally extractive. It's obsessed with quick multiples, placing aggressive, high-risk bets, riding speculative hype cycles, and aiming for rapid, short-term extraction. But then we have the alternative, legitimacy VC. This model completely abandons that whole casino vibe. Instead, it acts like a hands-on venture architecture lab, nurturing a vineyard. I mean, you wouldn't strip mine a vineyard for a quick payoff, right? You plant seeds, you weather the seasons, and you commit to a full 10-year time horizon. And why 10 years? Because difficult, world-changing technology simply cannot be rushed in some 2-year hype cycle. It absolutely requires compounding growth. Moving on to Section 2, the provenance VC subset, the mathematical execution. To shift from that high-level philosophy of the vineyard down to the strict mechanics, we really need to nail down this definition. While legitimacy VC is the broad philosophy of building high-trust ecosystems through long-term stewardship, provenance VC is the exact, fastidious, mathematically verifiable execution of that philosophy. Think about it. To actually support a high-trust ecosystem in the real world, you absolutely must have a reliable, mathematically perfect record of who contributed what. If an investor or a founder can't definitively prove who owns a piece of code or a digital asset, the whole thing crumbles the second it's audited. Provenance VC establishes an unbreakable chain of title, basically baking undeniable truth right into the digital substrate. This really breaks down the distinction perfectly. The sources compare standard legitimacy VC, like Mike Mopple's pattern breaker philosophy, to a royalist model. In that setup, the VC acts almost like a king, using their social capital to sort of bestow legitimacy upon a founder. It relies really heavily on social belief and signals. But provenance VC, totally different. It's a Republican model. The VC doesn't bestow value at all. Instead, they act as a clinical librarian archiving realized truth. They rely on cold, hard, cryptographic evidence, what the sources beautifully call the record of sweat. So to bypass that extractive casino layer we talked about earlier, the VC provides the substrate for the author to mathematically prove the sweat of their brow. Section 3, crossing the semiotic bridge, a descent to the metal. Okay, so how do we actually record this sweat at the hardware level? We have a massive physical divide to cross here. At step 1, we have human cognition, OS alpha. It's warm, it's messy, it's highly associative. Then, all the way over at step 3 is the physical silicon hardware itself, the arithmetic logic unit, or ALU. This hardware is completely blind to our intentions. It demands cold, rigid exactness. So to cross this frankly alien divide between fluid human thought and raw electrical voltages, we use step 2, the semiotic bridge. We literally squeeze our fluid imagination through a rigid bridge to safely map our intent down to pure physics. Now you might be wondering, what exactly forms the foundation of this powerful bridge? The answer is pure text. Strictly formatted text, like JSON or Python scripts, is the universal deterministic interface. The sources actually poetically refer to this structured text as the divine script. It is quite literally the only reliable way to safely compile your messy, beautifully associative human intent straight into hard physical reality. By using strict text scripts, we mandate absolute precision. And most importantly, we completely bypass these sloppy approximations, or what the sources call the wood chipper effect, of relying entirely on AI pattern matchers to just guess our math. Which brings us to Section 4, the Agentic Publishing House, the deterministic layer. This deterministic text pipeline radically reshapes how we view business structures. We have to make a fundamental distinction here. We must separate the AI from the agent. AI is not the house itself, it is simply the metabolic engine. It's the furnace that bakes the discrete units of truth, the bricks, if you will. But a pile of bricks isn't a house, right? The agent is the sovereign anchor that recognizes those AI-generated bricks and fixes them into a rigid deterministic layer. Therefore, the modern venture architecture lab isn't just some software factory pumping out code. It is an agentic publishing house, where the agentic layer creates a habitable, deterministic foundation out of all that raw AI compute. And honestly, this completely transforms our entire understanding of venture capital. Modern VC is essentially the modern stationer's company. A publishing house isn't just a printer. It's a clinical validator. It takes a raw signal, the author's intent, and provides the substrate. It provides the metabolic capital, like the massive raw compute power, required for an author to actually realize their vision at scale. By viewing VC as a publishing house activity, we completely move away from that speculative gambling we saw in the casino model and move into clinical stewardship. The VC's real job is to ensure a creator's authorship is seen, cited, and most importantly, permanently secured in the archives. And finally, Section 5, securing creator sovereignty, protecting the author. So, how does this entire mathematical and venture architecture actively protect the human author? Well, the ultimate goal of combining that 10-year legitimacy VC vineyard with this mathematically exact protective shell is perfectly summarized right here: the clinical realization of inalienable value. True authorship, that genuine, intentional human effort, is deeply rooted in our consciousness. The goal of this architecture is to keep the founder firmly in the driver's seat. It fully respects the moral and economic rights of the creator, ensuring that their life's work isn't just swallowed up whole by massive, faceless AI monopolies. The sources outline a few absolutely brilliant mechanisms to enforce this. First, protective licenses, like the EGPL, act as a defensive shield. They actually trigger source code disclosure upon network interaction, which actively prevents corporate lock-in. Second, specialized smart contracts, like contract-secured revenue, transform these systems into yield-bearing assets. This means a portion of transaction fees flows directly back to the author, not just the network sequencer. And finally, by wrapping these open source tools together, founders can actually create permissionless patents. The code is open for all to see and use, but the system guarantees the author is clinically paid for their sweat of the brow, right down at the silicon level. It's a real game changer. As this entire landscape of startup funding and technological architecture fundamentally shifts beneath our feet, we are all left with a really critical choice. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to deeply ponder. Where are you going to invest your intent? Where will you build your legacy? Will you choose the fast, extractive, ultimately disposable casino of the liquidator VC, or will you build alongside the sustainable, mathematically sound, compounding vineyard of the legitimacy VC? The future of how we innovate and how we protect true human authorship depends entirely on your answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep building.